The first time little Sophie spoke, the entire boardroom fell silent. Not because the word was loud, but because for 7 years, no one had ever heard her voice. "Dad." The tiny whisper slipped from the lips of the little girl standing near the glass doors of one of the most powerful companies in New York City. Papers stopped rustling, phones lowered. Executives stared in disbelief, and across the room, billionaire CEO Victoria Hale nearly collapsed. Her daughter was mute. At least, that's what every doctor in America had told her. Victoria Hale had everything money could buy: private jets, magazine covers, luxury penthouses overlooking Manhattan, and a tech empire worth billions. The world called her the Iron Woman of Wall Street. She built her company from nothing after losing her husband Daniel in a tragic car accident when Sophie was only 6 months old. But behind the polished smile and designer suits was a mother carrying a heartbreak no amount of money could heal. After Daniel's death, Sophie stopped responding to the world. As she grew older, she never spoke a single word. Specialists called it selective traumatic mutism. Therapists tried everything: music therapy, speech therapy, emotional support animals, even experimental treatments overseas. Nothing worked. By age 7, Sophie communicated only through drawings and quiet gestures. Victoria loved her daughter fiercely, but guilt consumed her every day. She blamed herself for burying herself in work after Daniel died. Maybe Sophie had grown up surrounded by silence because her mother was never truly there. That Tuesday morning had already been a disaster. Victoria's company was on the verge of a merger worth billions, and tensions filled the office. Investors demanded answers. Employees feared layoffs. Victoria walked through the lobby with Sophie beside her because the nanny had canceled unexpectedly. Sophie clutched her stuffed rabbit tightly as executives rushed around them. "Stay close to me, sweetheart," Victoria whispered. But children noticed the people adults ignore. Near the security desk sat an older janitor mopping the marble floor. His uniform was faded, his hair gray beneath a worn baseball cap. Most employees walked past him without even looking, but Sophie stopped. The old man looked up and smiled warmly. "Careful there," he said gently. "Floor's slippery." Victoria barely glanced at him. But Sophie didn't move. The janitor noticed the stuffed rabbit in her hands. "That bunny's seen a lot of adventures, huh?" For some reason, Sophie slowly nodded. Victoria froze. Her daughter rarely acknowledged strangers. The old man leaned against the mop handle. "You know, my little girl had a rabbit just like that." Sophie looked up at him carefully. "She carried it everywhere," he continued softly, "even when she got scared." Something changed in Sophie's eyes. Victoria checked her watch impatiently. "Sir, excuse us, we're late." The man nodded politely. "Of course, sorry." Then quietly he added, "Fear can lock words away sometimes, but love brings them back." Victoria stopped walking. Before she could respond, one of her executives hurried over. "Miss Hale, the investors are waiting." She turned away for only a moment, and that's when it happened. Sophie tugged the janitor's sleeve gently. The old man bent down closer, and in a tiny trembling voice, Sophie whispered, "Dad." Trembling voice in her throat. Every employee nearby stood frozen. The old man's eyes filled instantly with tears. What did you say, sweetheart?" Sophie stared at him with heartbreaking innocence. "Dad." Victoria rushed forward, her hands shaking violently. "Sophie, baby, say that again." But Sophie immediately grew frightened and silent again, burying her face into a rabbit. Victoria dropped to her knees, crying openly in the middle of the lobby. For years she had begged God for this moment. One word, one sound, one miracle. The janitor looked equally shaken. He removed his cap slowly, revealing tears streaming down his weathered face. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't mean to upset her." Victoria stared at him carefully for the first time. There was something strangely familiar about him. His eyes, his voice, even the way he smiled. "Have we met before?" she asked softly. The old man hesitated. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out an old silver lighter. Victoria gasped. It was Daniel's. Her late husband's initials were engraved on the side. D.H. Her knees nearly gave out. "Where did you get that?" The old man swallowed hard. "Because Daniel Hale was my son." The world around Victoria seemed to stop spinning. "What? My name is Samuel," he said quietly. "Daniel's father." Victoria stared at him in shock. Daniel had once told her his father abandoned the family when he was young. They'd never met again. Victoria assumed the man was dead. Samuel looked down in shame. I deserved to disappear. I was an alcoholic back then, angry at the world. I hurt my family badly. His voice cracked. Daniel cut ties with me years ago, and I don't blame him. Victoria couldn't speak. I found out about his death too late, Samuel continued. By the time I came looking for you, your company had grown massive. Security wouldn't let me near you, so I got a janitor job here 6 months ago just to see my granddaughter from a distance. Victoria covered her mouth, sobbing. He has your eyes, Samuel whispered to Sophie gently. Daniel used to look at people exactly like that. Sophie slowly peeked at him again. Samuel crouched carefully to her level. You miss him too, don't you? And for the first time in years, Sophie nodded while tears rolled down her cheeks. The lobby fell silent except for quiet crying. Victoria realized something devastating in that moment. Every therapist had tried to force Sophie to speak, but this man had simply made her feel safe, seen, loved. Samuel never asked Sophie what was wrong with her. He spoke to her like she was whole already, and somehow that unlocked something buried deep inside her heart. Over the following weeks, everything changed. Victoria canceled meetings she once believed were more important than life itself. She started spending mornings making pancakes with Sophie instead of answering emails. She laughed more, worked less, and every afternoon, Samuel joined them at the park. At first, Sophie only whispered tiny words. Hi, rabbit, again, but slowly her voice grew stronger. One evening under a golden sunset in Central Park, Sophie looked at Victoria and smiled. Mommy? Victoria burst into tears immediately. Yes, baby. I'm happy, 2 words. 3 words. That was all it took to heal years of pain. Months later, Victoria stood before thousands of employees at the company's annual gala. But instead of discussing profits or stock prices, she told a different story. A janitor reminded me that people are not healed by money, she said emotionally. They're healed by love, patience, and being truly seen. Then she invited Samuel and Sophie onto the stage. The audience rose in thunderous applause as Sophie proudly held her grandfather's hand. Victoria looked at the crowd with tears in her eyes. The most powerful voice in the world, she said softly, is often the one we almost stop waiting to hear. And in that moment, surrounded by love instead of loneliness, Sophie leaned close to her grandfather and whispered the word that changed all their lives forever. Dad.